So now that you've decided you want to use a 3-point saddle to go over your obstruction, we have to look at the 3-point saddle chart. It is the easiest way to bend up a 3-point saddle because all your measurements are kind of right there. And it is up on screen now, so we can kind of go through it together. So typically when I'm bending 3-point saddles, it's kind of situational which bend I'm going to be using, whether it's the 45-degree center bend or a 60-degree center bend. But just know you have to take out your center bend will be the larger number, so 45 or 60-degree bend, and then the smaller numbers will be your outside bends, and they'll be basically undoing what you did in the center. So with a 45, your other bends will be 22.5 degrees, and for a 60-degree bend, center bend, your smaller bends will be 30 degrees. So you're basically just undoing what you had previously done. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using the 45-degree center bend and the 22.5 degree basically reset bends. When you're doing this, you measure basically from your obstruction to the center of or from the top of your box to the center of your obstruction. And with the bend that I'm going to be using, the 45-degree center bend, you basically multiply, again, one of those multipliers, the height of the obstruction times 2.5 inches. In this case, I'm going to take my center bend, the obstruction here, and I'm going to round up a little bit. So I'm going to say it's 2 inches to the top of this, and that way it works nice with the chart. You don't have to use that chart on the exact numbers it says, but it is easier. So I'm going to say it's 2 inches, and at that point, those 2 inches, the 2-inch offset that I'm going to be doing would be essentially 5 inches from your center bend. The one last thing you do have to remember is the shrink calculation on this. It is very important because with a 3-point saddle, if the middle point of that saddle is not exactly in the center, it tends to look a little weird. So you do have to account for that, and I'll go over that shortly. So now that we have our bend that we're going to be doing, we're going to take our first measurement. Now the first measurement we need is from the top of the box to the center of the obstruction or the conduit, the pipe, whatever you're going over. So in this case, it actually is exactly 15 inches. Now with the shrink itself, if you're using the chart, and the one that I'm going to be using, the shrink is 3/16 of an inch for every inch you have to go over top of the obstruction. So I'm going to go 2 inches over, which means the shrink for me would be 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to first mark my center of bend, applying my extra 3/8 of an inch to that from the end. So this is what that looks like. So measuring here, and it was 15 inches, right? Yeah, 15 inches. So we have 15 inches here, plus 3/8 of an inch would be right here. So we're just adding just a little bit extra to that mark, and that way, when we do this bend, the center of that bend will be exactly in the center of that conduit. Now, once I have that marked out, my center of bend mark, I'm going to go off of that mark, and I'm going to measure my other 2 marks. So the other 2 marks that I need is for every inch of rise that you're going over, you're essentially adding 2.5 inches to that mark. So I'm going over 2 inches, so 5 inches from the center mark to either side. So I will add those on, and then I'll be right back. So now that I've gone and marked up our conduit, we have our middle of bend here, and then we have our 2 end pieces, and I've applied the 2.5 times 2 because it is a 2-inch offset I'm going to be doing, a 2-inch 3-point saddle I'm going to be doing. We have to go ahead and line up our first bend. So typically with the 3-point bend, we always do our middle bend first. Okay. Now, before I go ahead and do that, the one thing I do want you to look at is the bender itself. So we have this extra mark up here, this little teardrop mark, this little arrow mark right here, and then there's a little notch on the top of the bender itself. That mark right there is the mark you're actually going to be using to complete your middle bend for your 3-point saddle. It's the only time you'd actually use that mark for anything, but that's what it is used for. So I'm going to take my conduit here. I'm going to line up my bender, and it can be a little tricky to line this up properly because it doesn't sit exactly right. But that's kind of what it will look like when it's lined up on the mark itself. Okay. Now again, when you go and make this bend, if you've made a previous box offset, you want to make sure that you're lined up properly, you won't be bending this conduit the wrong way. So in this case, I'm bending my conduit, the box offset is coming up like this. I'm making my first bend in the middle. It's going to basically bend the conduit like this. My second bend is going to kick up this piece of pipe to make this flat, and my third bend on this side is going to kick up that conduit to make it flat here. So because I am doing the 45 with the 22, 45 middle bend with 22 outer bends, I'm going to bend my first bend, come down here and bend nice smooth motion to 45 degrees, right about there. Okay. And at that point, I want to stay away from that middle of that bend. So I'm going to flip this around, line up my second bend from the end, just like you would normally bend a piece of conduit. And I'm going to bend this time to the 22.5 degree mark. It might be labeled on your bender just 22 degrees, but nice smooth motion. You get to roughly the 22 degree mark. I'll just show you on the bender there where I'm at, and that's about right. Okay, and then the last one, I'm going to flip the conduit around, put my mark there, make sure everything is nice and straight, because again, you will get dog legs if you, the pipe will be coming out one way or another, so you do want to make sure that that pipe is as straight as it can possibly be. All right, and then again, in a nice smooth motion, I don't have a lot on here, but should be able to still do it. Right about there should be what your 3-point saddle should look like. And that right there is your 3-point saddle. So you can see if I'm looking like this, the conduit is nice and straight. There's no dog legs or anything like that in there. And the center of bend mark is now, if I look at that, it is center of the mark. So that adjustment that we made by 3/8 of an inch did pan out the way we wanted it to. And you can see here, you'd be able to get a strap right there. It is connected to the box. And then it completes up on this side where it is nice and parallel with the wall. I did go a 2-inch offset here, or a 2-inch 3-point saddle here. I just found it's a little bit of extra room. It's nice to do. You could go a little closer in if you wanted, but I typically make mine like that, and it gives it a little extra room just in case you have to make any adjustments. All right. Hope you enjoyed the video, and have a great day.